Hello. This is a resumption of the premises license application for Artisan in Wargrave. We had an unforeseen interruption, which has now been resolved. Nothing serious at all. And Mr. Mitchell was presenting the applicant's case. And if you'd like to continue, please. My apologies for the interruption.
Thanks, sir. In consultation with the chair, we've agreed you've all been good enough that I don't have to start at the beginning and go right through everything again. And I don't think anybody would be prejudiced if I carry on as where I was from. So thank you for that. Perhaps if I may, I could go back to Mr. Wilson, because otherwise I'm going to lose track of where I am. So that's at page 61. As I said, precise address unknown, but he lives opposite the applicant premises and welcomes the idea of more trade for Wargrave. And unlike so many others, cannot wait for the day when the high street is busy with local small businesses. If I then jump to Geoffrey Knight at page 63, again, address unknown. He has personalised his rep against one of the directors of the applicant company in his addendum to his rep at page 65. And the comments that he's makes at page 63 should be given the weight they deserve by the committee. At page 65, already personalising these comments, Mr. Knight suggests that alcohol deliveries would be made early, as though it were a dray wagon of some description delivering barrels of beer. We would refute that high street residents have been regularly woken by early morning deliveries to the cafe, and it follows we dispute that early deliveries would become more frequent if a licence was granted. In fact, the early morning deliveries were milk. You will all be aware that there have been huge difficulties with transport, not least across over the last 2 or 3 years. Milk in particular has been a problem. Those milk deliveries no longer come to the high street. Of interest, it might be that in the small cafe further down the road, the milk deliveries still go there, but that's not germane to what we're talking about. We do refute absolutely that there would be any alcohol deliveries early in the mornings. That's simply not going to happen. And his rep should be given the weight it deserves by committee because his summation is not relevant to this application, and he has personalised that rep. Mr. Warlow at page 69 lives above the premises at 71A and has submitted a detailed and well thought out representation, but I would suggest that it needs to be addressed in line with the guidelines and in line to the exclusion of matters that are not for the committee or have little or no bearing on the application. It is our submission that so much of this representation is not relevant for the committee to consider as part of the hearing. It is a collection of many reasons against an unwanted grant. Planning is a parallel authority, as committee is aware, and actually overrides licensing so far as hours are concerned, and it is not disputed that these premises can trade for the hours sought. On Tuesday, the planning enforcement officer visited the premises and suggested that we make a section 73, I think it is, section 73 application to change the hours to fall in line with, more in line with the weekday hours. And he has indicated that they continue to trade as they are until such time as that has been dealt with. Any reference to hours or indeed deliveries must sit outside of this application where they match. Photos of deliveries in the dark do not give a time either. Any waste generated by alcohol sales will be dealt with in accordance with agreement reached with the council's officers. And this is not a late night refreshment licence, so nothing else applies. You would simply be interested in the waste from the sale of alcohol. Access to the rear area through the door labelled 69A will simply not increase the potential for crime, and if it did, the police would raise it. This is with regard to storage on alcohol on site. If there was a noise issue in the future, then the applicants have no doubt that the issue will be raised with the environmental health and, of course, noise pollution, as have so many other things been over the last few weeks. But the supply of alcohol will not add to any existing issues if they already exist. Doors banging, however annoying, and they must be, are not a licensing issue, but having been made aware of it, we've asked the applicants to consider putting a competent closure on the door. It is perhaps worthy of note that the occupants of the applicant premises hear every time the residential residents leave their flats as well, as closing their front doors can also reverberate around the building. It's a fact of life in older buildings. We know that deliveries are a problem for most high streets, because that is what this is, and they are the responsibility of planning and highways, not licensing. We are happy, however, to undertake not to receive alcohol deliveries outside of our opening hours as an additional condition. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure. I believe it will be Caroline Lyon at page 75, lives at 84 High Street and suggests that delivery drivers park outside on WLO lines. Well, I'm sorry, they're allowed to if making deliveries. They are only not allowed to if there are chevron lines on the curbstones prohibiting deliveries, or it is in a red zone. And this is a matter for planning and highways, as previously said. The former Greyhound pub is brought up again, and it is not germane to the application, although it should be noticed by all parties that Wokingham Council's decision that the Greyhound is not an asset of the community value is based on wholly different criterion to the Licensing Act 2003, which does not accept lack of need or over provision as a reason for not to grant, unless a cumulative impact policy exists, in which case a new set of rules apply again. There are 2 pubs currently trading on High Street. Actually, it's only one at the moment. And we understand the Woodcliff Hall opposite is also licensed. It follows then that the comment made about further licensed premises not being needed fails under the need criterion, and the protection of children from harm comment is just another throw of the dice in this instance, as again the responsible authorities are happy with the applications made. The personalisation of the comment on the director of the applicant company is inflammatory and not accurate, but a theme exists among several of the reps we have before us, which is disappointing. We also categorically reject the proposition that it's not appropriate to grant the application. There is no reason under the Act not to do so. Finally, not least of course, but finally we have Caroline Mccoy. I'm so sorry, I can't say that. Mccoy, I do apologise. At page 91 and living at 69A High Street, again above the client premises. Again, a comprehensive representation, which straight away refers to planning, which is not relevant to this application. And I hope that we've been able to address that following the planning officers or planning enforcement officers visit on Tuesday. Also, much is made of the additional noise from music and alcohol consumption, but firstly, music was not ever applied for. Secondly, there is no need for a premises license application of music background or background music. And thirdly, my clients are entitled to open at 7 o'clock Monday to Friday under the very planning quoted against the application. Yet we are only choosing to commence the supply of alcohol after 0900 as a, if you wish, as a sympathetic way of looking at the local situation. Nothing else is relevant to this application. Reference deliveries. For the first time in the reps provided, it has been acknowledged honestly that the early deliveries still happen on the odd occasion. In other words, they don't happen majoritively. The way it has been presented to us in the reps is a bit stronger, in the other reps is a bit stronger than that, but I know which one I believe. And in any event, we're offering no alcohol deliveries outside of our permitted opening hours, which should satisfy this issue under the Act, even if it was relevant. Waste is not an issue for the committee. However, for the committee's comfort, as I've said, one of the several visits that we have been made by various council officers to the applicant premises over the last few weeks, as though from out of the blue with regard to a complaint about rats. But we are pleased to have already advised that the officers confirmed they could find no trace of any of the rats and were content with the waste arrangements. So far as any bottles waste, these will be dealt with sympathetically to the surroundings and certainly not late at night, because we won't be there late at night. This is not a pub or a club after all, and the whole application, with the greatest of respect, needs to be kept in perspective. So far as the prevention of crime is concerned, the police are completely happy with the application, and there is little likelihood of an increase in crime due to the storage of alcohol. With regards to the CCTV, I believe I've addressed this already, but the police asked for 31 days on the recording library, and we've agreed to this. 28 days makes more sense and is being used more and more as it is a clear forward period. 31 days, as I've explained, harkens back to the 31 tapes. On public safety, we are again referred to deliveries, which are not a matter for this committee. And on the noise emanating from the kitchen, this is not alcohol sales and alcohol consumption. And the responsible authorities are content with the situation in any event. Public nuisance reference the front door we've addressed with the near mirror rep from Mr. Warlow. And these issues now will be looked at by the applicants with regard to considering door closures and WD-40 on hinges. I'm sorry, we have no response to the comment about disco lights, I'm afraid, as in my view, this is just another red herring. Deliveries are deliveries, and they happen with every business in this high street and high streets across the borough and the country. Introducing alcohol may mean an extra delivery or even 2 a week, but equally it may not. And having discussed it with the planning enforcement officer when he visited on Tuesday, every high street has it, and Wokingham deals with the issue with a soft touch because the officers are fully conversant with the operational challenges businesses face and the wider macroeconomic challenges. We have also addressed the waste issue and will liaise with council officers where necessary. The raising of the protection of children from harm is completely wrong in stating that there are no measures in the application to protect children from harm, as council officers, trading standards and the police will attest. Had there not been, all RAs would have made representation and none have. There is a nasty vein running through these representations, which I have not come across for many years, and it is a pity that several have been personalised. The guidelines are clear that the representations made, if they are to be supported, must show a causal link to the application sought and be supported by evidence. There is no causal link, nor importantly, any evidence adduced by any party, and there is no support from responsible authorities. I then would refer you to 9.12 in the guidelines. Again, would you wish that I read that out, sir, or are you content that I'm referring to? Thank you, sir. At 9.12, each responsible authority will be an expert in a respective field, and in some cases, is it likely that a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objective. For example, but the police have a key role in managing the nighttime economy and should have a good working relationship with those operating in their local area. The police should usually therefore be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of the crime and disorder licensing objective. However, any responsible authority under the under the 2003 Act may make representations with regard to any of the licensing objectives if they have evidence to support such representations. Licensing authorities must therefore consider all relevant representations from responsible authorities carefully, even where the reason for a particular responsible authority's interest or expertise in the promotion of a particular objective may not be immediately apparent. However, it remains incumbent on all responsible authorities to ensure that their representation can withstand the scrutiny to which they would be subject to at a hearing. The Act and the guidance are clear that the applicant has a responsibility only to sell alcohol to people of age who are not drunk and to those purchasing for people under age or under the influence of drink or drug. But equally, the Act at 221 and your policy are clear that the applicant cannot be held responsible for the actions of customers when they've left the premises, but nothing is alleged in the hours sought in any event other than the bench further up the road might be used to congregate. That said, the applicant is acutely aware of their social responsibilities and your policy, as well as the guidelines, and will strive to ensure that any issues they may have influence over are addressed. This will specifically include the provision of notices requesting that customers leave the premises quietly, as per guidelines, also at 2.21, even though we are actually closing at the latest 7 o'clock in the evening. This is not an 11 or a 1 o'clock close. Also, whilst these matters have not been raised by way of representation, other than perhaps an oblique reference to children in harm, other than all staff are individually trained or will be individually trained in the sale of alcohol, have to take a written test to prove their understanding of the responsibility placed on them when authorised to sell alcohol. And I have supplied copies of the training manuals to yourselves, and the police have already agreed that they are effective. This authority is in writing per guidelines, and subsequently at no more than 6 monthly intervals, staff are retrained, retested in writing, and then reauthorised in writing to continue selling alcohol. A refusals log is maintained at the site, and the Challenge 25 procedure is also embraced, with records kept in the refusals book as part of this process when refusals occur. The store also benefits from a CCT system already, and this will now be a 31-day library. And all of these elements, as I've said, have been agreed with the police, who is also content, as I've said, with the training regime and the diary that has already been provided to the committee. The diary is actually quite an interesting thing because that effectively gives a monthly refresher, because each member of staff is required to sign monthly to say that they are happy that they have been properly trained and they do understand their responsibilities, particularly with regard to Challenge 25. The complaints and representations made that relate to parking, deliveries, noise, rodents, waste and planning irregularities have, by happy circumstance of the application submission and various local complaints, been addressed by your own officers over the course of the last few weeks and have been found wanting in fact and relevance? May I suggest, perhaps cheekily, that the Licensing Act is a flawed device in many ways, but is what we have. And the case of Thwaites at paragraph 55 and 63 is also extremely relevant. And we must deal with this matter based not on what we know, feel, or even want to do, but rather with exactly what is before us today. An application for a premises license for the sale of alcohol for very specific and arguably limited hours in line with your policy and with no relevant evidence against the application, as there is none for the limited hours sought. I apologise about the time taken, but that is the application.
Thank you very much. I would just add that even though a responsible authority has not raised a representation, doesn't mean that anybody here or the panel can raise matters in that area. It's not to say that it's all must be all correct because they haven't raised. They could have overlooked something, or we may we could disagree. So just to make that point, members, any questions you'd like to ask the applicant?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask why you consider that you need an off licence, why you can't just have a licence for serving alcohol in the cafe.
I do apologise. Yes, it's not an off licence per se. So this is not a convenience store. And in so many respects, it would be classed more like a restaurant licence. But you will know that with a restaurant licence, you can't actually take the alcohol that you've purchased outside of the building. So what we've looked at, we've tried to create within the application something that is bespoke to the store. And we are going to be selling a limited range of perhaps higher end product for service to customers within the store. But at the same time, people may wish to purchase something and take it away for consumption later, or indeed, having already tried some of the, what we would like to say may be unique to this store against others in the area, they may come in just to buy those particular products as a repeat purchase at a later date. But it is not going to be a 16-foot run of ambient wine and beer and a 12-foot fridge full of chilled product. All the display, if I can refer you to the plan, is behind what we call the serve-over unit. So it's going to be a very restricted range, but rather than perhaps somebody buying a bottle of wine and having to leave the half bottle they haven't drunk, they would be entitled to take it away with them by virtue of the off sales, which they're not entitled to do if it's on sales only.
Can I just pick up on that? On the supply of alcohol timings, they start at 9 a.m, apart from Sunday where it's 10 a.m. Are you intending to sell alcohol to people in the premises that early in the day? Seems very early. Or is it just there because for people to buy it and take away, acting as an off license?
Actually, sir, it's both. I specialise in sites on hubs. So I have licensed several sites where they are effectively 24 hours and they are on and off. And people are buying, for sake of argument, an orange with Prosecco in it. And there's a name for that. And for the life of me, I can't think what it is at the moment. And that would be an early morning tipple with toast or a toasted bun or something. That is the reality of it. There's no expectation we're going to be doing lots and lots of on license at 9 o'clock, but we might well do somebody might have a bottle of wine that they particularly enjoyed last week and they're going to see Aunt Flo and they want to take it with them. And it's that sort of scenario that we're trying to cover. It was very carefully thought out as to what the impact and the effect would be.
Okay, I understand what you're trying to do. Thank you for that.
I wonder, is this the right time to ask about children's parties? Yes, right. Because I think if I've read the paperwork correctly, you do offer children's parties at the venue. And I wondered if you could just expound a little bit more detail on how exactly these could be run, so that you don't, if I could be blunt here, you don't have parents overdoing it somewhat and disgracing themselves in front of their children. I don't mean to be flippant. It's just, it was a worry that I don't usually see children's parties taking place in a place where there's alcohol sales, but maybe that's just a reflection on my children.
I don't wish to contradict what you say, but there are lots and lots of restaurants and public houses and indeed hotels where precisely that occurs. But the training, I'm quite proud of our training. It does cover people who are potentially drinking too much. There's a specific section on whether somebody has imbibed too much, and we would be keeping a control on it. But also, certainly the children would not be having any alcohol. That's a given. But there would always be controls in place. But if there was, I think the parties tend to occur, unless I'm wrong, in the bike room.
I think we've probably carried out maybe 2 or 3 children's parties in the 18, 20 months we've been open. It's not something we advertise. It's just sometimes a parent might come in and say, can they all come in for milkshakes at 3 o'clock? And run me a tab and I'll pay it when they've finished. And that's it. We don't do children's parties per se. We certainly don't advertise the proper, themed. We don't do that. We're a coffee shop, but we will facilitate if requested for maybe 8 children or something.
Well, that's fine, thank you. I think I just wanted to be clear in my mind that you didn't have a bespoke room for children's parties. Right, thank you.
So it is possible for the children to be adjacent to where people are eating and drinking alcohol.
In that sense, it's no different to any other pub or restaurant, certainly.
So, not being an expert, I'll ask Neil. I thought is there not legislation about separating children from the alcohol area in pubs?
Yeah, no, I'm not aware of such, and certainly it's certainly sort of permissible in that respect. I think the main thing is to make sure the children are not exposed a directly to alcohol, also the effects of adults being affected by alcohol. Chair, can I just ask a quick question on the back of the councillors to Mr. Mitchell? One scenario where there's a children's party, and so you have children's party, but you have other customers being served as well. Is there any provision there for members of staff maybe being more vigilant in that circumstance, where maybe they have a larger amount of children in the premises to make sure that other customers aren't overdoing it as well?
Yes, sir. Part of what we do is we assess each application in its own merits. So you have been supplied as an example with our training portfolio. You'll notice it doesn't name the site at all, because what we do is then when we have a grant, so I'm so sorry, that's presumptuous. If we have a grant, we would then look at any conditions that you sought to apply to it. And then we would make the training regime bespoke to that. And as part of that, we would look at the children's parties. But when we discussed them, there was only an element of perhaps 8 or 10 children, not a running horde of 2 football teams or something like that. And the premises, again, if I can refer you to the plan, relatively small, and they can be sectioned off. So it's not something that in my risk assessments I've assessed as being an issue that isn't containable and dealable with regard to the training manuals that we already have, as long as we address it properly.
Can I come back on the children's parties? A mum of 4 and a grandmother of 8. To me, a children's party is a fairly robust affair with a lot of noise and activity. And as a member of the public, I wouldn't want to be in a cafe when that was going on. But with my children, I might tolerate it, but it wouldn't be nice for members of the public. With my safeguarding hat on, I am concerned that you've got children, and if they are partying, that's very different to sitting down, sharing a milkshake around a table for half an hour. Those are 2 totally different activities, and with partying comes safeguarding. And also, to a certain extent, in a public place with children, there is a safeguarding issue. How will you handle that when you have other customers in your cafe who may be going a bit over the top with the Prosecco? And how would you control that? That's a concern for me.
Can I just confirm as well that I don't know where the children's partying phrase came from. We don't facilitate children's parties in the sense that you're talking. I have a 10-year-old and a party is chaos. and it's normally at a trampoline centre, and they have a special party room where it's kitted out for kids to run around, throw food at each other, whatever they do. We don't facilitate that. We simply would be asked by one of our customers, would it be okay for our children to come in? There's 6 of them, 8 of them. They want a milkshake and a brownie, and that would be it. We do not and have never facilitated a full-on kiddies party in the sense that we know as mothers and grandparents. It doesn't happen.
No, okay, so can I throw it open, as it were, to anybody who wants?
Chair, thank you. Just on behalf of the panel, there's a few questions I think might be relevant. Mr. Mitchell, firstly, it's just a semi-issue of law, because in your presentation you were mentioning several times that parking, highways issues aren't licensing issues. I beg to differ very slightly, because I appreciate obviously they're controlled under different regimes, and obviously licensing, we rely on the other regimes to control them. But I could see a scenario where it could trigger the public safety and or the public nuisance, where you have a situation such as a busy high street where there is already a parking and highways problem. And the panel might have to consider, would the addition of extra traffic due to the licensable activity, i.e. delivery of alcohol, customers coming in to consume alcohol, whether that would add to the problem. I think it could only become a licensing issue if it was such that then that tipped the balance and the highways issue was so great that, for example, we're not just talking inconvenience, we're talking about blocking the highway to the extent that emergency services, what have you, it becomes dangerous to traffic. What would you say about that? Just that scenario was put to you.
The element that we're talking about has not been addressed by any of the responsible authorities, although I accept fully that I referred to highways and they are not part of this exercise. And the reason they're not part of this exercise is it was never deemed to be relevant to this exercise. So in a sense, in the nicest possible way, I'm trying to rebut what you're saying, because if it was part of the Licensing Act, then highways would be a responsible authority on whom we would have to serve the appropriate paperwork. They're not, and my submission would be that it isn't. And I'm sorry, but everything else that we've discussed, there is a body that is responsible for it, and we have to serve them. So protection of children from harm falls under a specific heading under the responsible authorities, and we serve them, and they haven't come back to us. And all the other elements, environmental health, even down to the control of vermin and such like, there are responsible authorities that we serve. Highways are not that responsible authority. Planning are, and they do have, if I said oversight, would that be too strong a word? They haven't come back to us either. They simply haven't. And the planning enforcement officer has suggested that Wokingham has a relatively, I'm not using his words because I wasn't in part of the meeting, but if I infer that he suggested there is a light touch applied in the same way that it is applied across this borough, and I can speak for other boroughs, trust me, I work all over the country. High streets are high streets are high streets, and more they've got yellow lines all the way down. And unless they have, and I've called it the wrong thing, but the little yellow thingy that stops deliveries for a known period of time, delivery drivers are allowed to park on double yellows and make a delivery. And actually people, as long as it's a bona fide delivery or collection, ordinary private cars are allowed to. If there is a major problem, then at some stage in the future, if it was seen to be a major problem, there is facility for those who have the responsibility to deal with it. But at the minute, we're suggesting that it's probably not as big a problem as perhaps has been made out. It is a busy high street. We don't dispute, I think it's 2 million vehicle movements or something a year. That sounds a phenomenal number, but I compared how many go past my house and it's pretty much the same. And I don't live on a particularly busy road. I don't mean my actual road, but the end of the road is pretty much the same. So we have to keep the whole thing in perspective, but they're not responsible authorities. And therefore I can only suggest that it isn't as big a issue in that regard. I don't know if I've satisfied you in that regard.
I think it's a perfectly acceptable answer. So thanks very much for that. Jack, can I just ask a couple of questions, just on the back of that? Now, you mentioned deliveries. I think it'd be helpful for the panel to understand what is, if you're granted the license, what is the change? How is the alcohol going to be delivered to the premises? This is my first question. So can you sort of paint a picture around that, please?
Not with horses and a dray, that I promise you. Usually, because of the volume that's expected, it will either be, if it's a wholesale operation, it will be as part of an existing delivery. There is a likelihood that there might be a dedicated supplier, in which case they may come once a week or once a fortnight. It really does depend on the trade. If the trade is such that it gets huge, we would have to come back to you because we haven't asked for sufficient display to service a massive amount of business. If I can refer you to the plan, the counter is 12 feet wide, something like that. And all the display is behind the counter. And that includes the barista area and things like that. We're not talking a convenience store. We're not talking a massive store. We're talking about a small bespoke coffee offer that we're trying to enhance by allowing, say somebody wants a coffee and a brandy in the morning or a Prosecco with orange juice. And it's still killing me that I can't remember what that's called, but there is a mimosa. Somebody wants one of those, or in the afternoon, somebody wants a cake and a Prosecco. My wife would love that, for example. It's not a queue of people queuing to buy slabs of Stella Artois at £12 a case because it's £18 down the road or anything like that. This is small, bespoke, and if it gets bigger, we have to come back to you because we won't be able to display for the volume that you're perhaps worrying that we're going to have. We would like that, but we would still have to come back to you.
So you're not delivering barrels of beer? Obviously not. You haven't got a cellar.
Absolutely not. And if you'd seen the cellar, you couldn't get it down there anyway.
All right. Thanks very much for that. All right. And just to confirm as well, you've made it clear that you'd be happy with a condition that deliveries of alcohol are only within the permitted hours that you're seeking.
Yes, not the permitted alcohol hours, the permitted opening hours, which are 0700 while 1900 and 9 while 5, I think, or 9 while 9. And you know what I'm saying. Whatever the planning hours are, it's in the documentation.
Well, I don't know. I'll just confirm that. So I got page 8, and this is the report, and the opening hours are 0700 to 1900 Monday to Friday, 0900 to 1800 Saturday, 1000 to 1700 on Sunday. So the delivery within that time frame.
Absolutely. No alcohol delivery will be outside of that. I have to say we don't now have any delivery to the premises outside of that anyway on the high street. Different alternative arrangements have been made.
Okay. Can I just have a supplemental question on that? As I understand it, and the panel's referred to it as off licensing, but I understand your answer to the question. Am I right in thinking as well that it seems to me you're looking at custom that would come into the shop to buy alcohol to take away? Are you planning any sort of service whereby a customer rings up or makes contact with you and you deliver it to them?
What we've had to do is project forward as to what potential business is. I've been in this business for, it pains me, 48 years this year. And when I started, people came to me. Now, in the space of 5 years, you can click a button and order bottles of wine, bottles of beer, donuts, pens, whatever you want that is delivered, or you can do what is known as click and collect, where you complete the purchase and then you go to store and pick it up. And I did allude to that earlier because the parish council, actually quite helpfully in a way, objected to that element of it. And what they said was that would lead to more delay. Actually, it doesn't, because it's a quicker transaction. If all you're doing is going in, you're not even paying for something. You're showing, if it's alcohol, you're showing ID and picking up what you've ordered. If it's a cake for Auntie Flo or a piece of pudding or something, whatever it is, you're just picking it up. So yes, what we're doing is looking to the future. We do not even do internet ordering at the moment, but it is coming, and it is coming really, really quickly. I own my own store. 5 years ago, we did nothing. Now, a biggish percentage, I mean, you're talking 10% of the store turnover is down to click and collect and collection. Delivery. So, and it would be wrong for me not to have suggested that that might happen, because technically we can do it anyway. But for completeness, I wanted the police licensing officer to know what we were doing, and we agreed how we were going about it. And you will see in the conditions that he's got something there, which is usually you have to prove age. You have to prove age to the person who's delivering, and it has to be a proper address. I'm splitting out the really prime ones. We have far more than that in our policy. So yes, it may be in the future that somebody will press a button and order a bottle of really nice claret that only we stock in the area. And yes, that might either be click and collect or it might be delivered. That's not now, but I'm trying to future-proof it, because otherwise it's not a minor variation, it's a full variation, and it costs virtually the same as this, just to change something that I should have done at the beginning. So whilst I might have messed up on the music and the dancing, I tried to make sure that I've got it future-proof. When I said to the applicants, Kate Holding, about doing, oh no, don't do that. I said, no, I know you don't, but you might do. And it might be that that's how the business progresses, and that's why we covered it.
I think I know the answer to the question, in which case then, what would be the plan? How would that be facilitated?
Right, if you look at the conditions that you have already, we've already agreed with the police licensing officer the outline of it. What we have is a proper delivery element. And please forgive me, I didn't put that in because I was only giving you the overall, and because the police licensing officer had already agreed that he didn't have an issue with it, I didn't think it was an issue. So that again is my fault. So what we have, if it's online, there are safeguards built into that you have to prove that you're of age. But in any event, the bottom line is, if it's collection, you have to produce ID for the collection. So that's as simple, that's the same as purchasing in store. If it's a delivery, the receiving person has to be the same person who's ordered it, or a nominee, because apparently that is allowed now as well. But that person must prove that they're over 18 by virtue of Challenge 25, and it has to be delivered to a formal residential or business address. So delivering it for the playing fields in Twyford is not acceptable, but delivering it to 69A High Street, that is acceptable, as long as that person is still producing ID. And also, it's not, what we say is it's not Challenge 25 as far as deliveries are concerned. We say the person who is receiving it has to have the ID of the person who ordered it. We actually take it further than the guidelines suggest at the moment. So we're saying that if Peter Brown orders it, Peter Brown accepts it, or we're not accepting it. And he has to produce his ID, even if he might look as old as me, because that's the way of it.
And just following on from that, in terms of the mechanics, how is the business going to deliver? How is it going to be by delivery van, and where is that delivery van going to pick up from, take it to the customer?
You cannot believe the number of platforms that are out there. Sorry, I'm using a tech word, but they're called platforms. You cannot believe the number of platforms that are out there. Snappy Shopper, Deliveroo, whoever it is. And there are already accepted working criterion that they use. And we then overlay ours with that so that their contract matches the requirements that we have. And so that is how it's dealt with.
Right. So just so I'm clarifying, what you're looking at is contracting with someone like Deliveroo, who would take care of the delivery part of the process.
Yes, but set within the criterion that we've already placed. And we probably wouldn't use Deliveroo as it happens, but I'm just using them because that's a known company. There are lots and lots of different platforms out there. Some of them are not well known, but actually are much, much, much better operators. And by virtue of my experience within retail, we can address that and find the right one when the time comes. But at the same time, it might be that with there might be somebody who wants something and they phone up and they say they want it. Technically, that falls under this, but it's no different to what we're talking about. But they could be doing that anyway. But we've just been upfront and saying in the future this might happen.
Just in the specifics, so where are they going to put their vehicle to pick up?
They would pull up outside or down the road.
Sorry, Mr. Mitchell, I'm just trying to cover all bases. You mentioned as well the planning conditions, and you mentioned the planning conditions and the planning conditions around hours of opening, what have you. And certainly my view is obviously a different regime. However, certainly there's allegations that the business is operating outside of those planning conditions. Now, one of the things the committee might be concerned about is if it makes licensing conditions, they're going to be kept to. So why has the business struggled to, has it kept to the planning conditions? And if it has, why has it struggled to do that?
You will know that the planning changed a massive amount following COVID and that there was a general relaxation. As part of that relaxation, hours are allowed to change. And indeed, you're allowed to go outside and do all sorts of things without gaining consent. And it was, I have discussed that, and it was something that was then carried on almost in error. But when it was, because somebody complained, it's actually fantastic because the enforcement officer actually came out on Tuesday and discussed it with us. And he has said that he has no issues with it carrying on as it is for now, subject to the planning consent being put in and being dealt with, as though he didn't use the word, but as though retrospective. That is my word, that is not his word, but that is my understanding of it. And you weren't there, I don't think, but that is the conversation that was had. So a planning application is going in. The planning advisor has already been contacted, and it will be going in very, very shortly to address these issues. If it is found subsequently that that's not acceptable, and it may be, or it may not, whatever that decision is, that is what we will stick with. But at the moment, we're working with what we had, which was the COVID thing, which was then run through because nobody actually understood you couldn't do that. And to be honest, I'm not into planning, and I was only ever addressing the licensing anyway. But the planning advisor has already been talked to this week. The planning enforcement officer has said that he is content that an application goes in, and that is how we are addressing it. So far as your question about why would they, what comfort does the committee have that they would fulfill the obligations under the Licensing Act? I have already explained that it's a criminal offence not to. If you don't follow planning, and first of all, can I say this was not an intent, so therefore the inference being that, oh, well, it's just planning. That was never the case. It just was a misunderstanding. But if you don't follow planning, it's not criminal. But if you don't follow licensing, I have explained in detail that it is criminal, and that the penalties are, well, actually, they're not limited, because level 5 or section 5, whatever you call it, now no longer has a limit on it. It's a whole different ballgame.
Can I just confirm for the panel that Artisan opened during lockdown when relaxed hours were in place, and that's all we've ever known. Hence the conversation with the council. It wasn't a deliberate, oh, we'll open when we like.
Just a matter of clarity, because Mr. Mitchell, the statement just made about the plan, obviously the planning side is on the edges of relevance to this, but just in terms of a breach of a planning, because I prosecute both licensing and planning. I'm absolutely right about licensing conditions. The penalties are eye-watering. With planning conditions, the way I understand it works is that a breach of condition is enforced by a notice. Then if the notice is breached, then it's a criminal matter that attracts a fine. So just to make sake of clarity, as we're in a public meeting.
And of course, we have not had a notice. And by virtue of the conversations with the officer, we are carrying on doing what we are doing now, subject to the application. If, as I say, that application finds against us, then we'll stop doing it. But right for now, we've been given the go ahead to carry on, subject to putting in the application. If we don't put the application in, I am sure that the enforcement officer will come back and enforce. But at the minute, it's working. If I said work in progress, would you understand I'm not being silly about it? It is literally a work in progress. And we don't know what the outcome will be. We would hope that it will be that we get the hours that we want, but if it's not, it's not, and we'll stick to those hours. And that same applies, of course, to, we're also now applying to change the rather bizarre cooking restrictions. But we have already satisfied environmental health and planning simply by virtue of all these meetings that we've had over the last two weeks, which for my part, I was so pleased because I thought that's great. We've got clarity, because otherwise I might be sitting here saying, I don't know. And you might be hearing people saying, well, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. We've actually got clarity from all the relevant authorities simply because so many people have complained and it's been addressed. But both elements are a work in progress. However, we are only sticking with the cooking side of it to that which we are allowed to do. But on the opening hours, in effect, it's a work in progress planning application, although it isn't in right now. It will be very, very, very shortly, if that satisfies.
Chair, just to say thank you very much for that time. Mr. Mitchell, thank you very much. A bit backwards and forwards between us there, but thank you for your time. Chair, I'll just say I'm asking questions on behalf of the committee. So if there's any questions the committee have on the back of those, then please just go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know whether no, we're happy. In which case, I will open it to the anyone here who wishes to question the applicant.
Yes, could I say something? Well, the reason I'm here, hats up to Mr. Mitchell. He made a very compelling point and he overrode the objections very well. But could I point out, I assume that the licensing committee would insist upon honest and accurate information. And during that presentation, there were 4 areas that were inaccurate. So that there are only 1 licensed premises open in Wargrave. There are 2, George and Dragon and the Ball Hotel. So there was a butcher's shop in the high street. There is no butcher's shop in the high street. He said that he went there yesterday morning and couldn't find a bench where anybody could congregate if they were buying alcohol at Artisan. There is a bench dead opposite Artisan, and there's another bench around the corner. So there's a number of things here. The accuracy has not been, and I think it's extremely important that it is accurate.
Would you like to come back on?
Certainly. On the other side of the road to the store is a shop front that says butchers. I was there at 7 o'clock this morning. If it's not open, I don't know that it's not a butcher's. I'm very sorry.
That shop is very clearly a private residence and hasn't been a butcher's for nearly 20 years, 25 years. It was previously an antique shop. It's perfectly clear it's no longer a butcher, and I'm sorry, I can't accept that as your explanation.
I think we need to deal with facts which are relevant to you. What is the relevance of whether it's a butcher's or an antique shop?
The accuracy of the presentation and the application.
Okay, I understand.
Can I find out what is the process now? Will I have an opportunity to present the objections? I have a number of slides I'd like to present.
Yes, you certainly will be able to do that. I don't know about the slide, please.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I mean, I have a number of questions which I can raise as well, but I'll probably raise them as I go through my presentation.
Yes, that's fine. So,
Okay.
Okay for the moment. Is anyone else? If not, no, we have no responsible. Pardon? Oh, sorry, Chair Chapman. Oh, sorry, Karen. Very good, David.
Thank you, Chairman. No further questions. Thank you. I want to raise some questions, but I'll let Phil go first. I don't know how this works, so. Okay.
Yeah, everyone will have a chance to put forward their own views on this application. Just clarify what the applicant has said. If there's something you don't understand.
Okay, I'll just go up on the children's class.
Could you, sorry to interrupt, could you give your names before you speak, please?
Sure.
Because it's being recorded, then we'll know who you are.
Caroline Mccoy.
Oh, I did get your name right, then I hope.
Sorry, I've lost the page. Sorry, someone else go.
Going back to the children's parties, I can show you the map of where I live in relation to the cafe. And underneath my living room, there's a bike store, and that's where they hold the children's parties. And the noise levels as they come in increases tremendously. I can show you an email from Nick Hart with regards to his answer to that. But in terms of 8.5 in the licensing, it says where events are taking place that are provided solely or mainly for children, the expectation is that no alcohol will be served. So this is in the statement though. So I don't know, I'm concerned about the situation with children's parties and alcohol.
Okay. Could you just say who you are for the record? Thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
If a party is held in, I don't know, if I called it the bicycle room, would you be happy with that as a description?
It's the bike room on the door, so the bike room.
That's good, bike room then. There wouldn't be any alcohol in there unless a parent had it in their hand. We've already explained that it's normally no more than around 8 anyway. It's not a party. And the objection seems to me to be more about noise that has been created with parties in the past rather than any rationale for going forward.
It's both. It's noise and parties.
Is it proposed to sell alcohol there?
Not to children, no.
Well, no. Sorry, the bike room is to the right, isn't it? It's a separate building. Is this part of the application?
Yes, the whole area is included because at times that room is used by cyclists who might stop and have a drink of some description or something to eat. So as far as the footprint for consumption is concerned, yes, it's part of it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes,
my name is Tom. Here, would you mind to read out again that you mentioned? I think you mentioned the room solely for the parties.
The bike room, as you know, is directly below my living room.
May I please ask you to read out what you read before?
Where events are taking place that are provided solely or mainly for children, the expectation is that no alcohol will be served.
We don't have a solely or merely provided room for children. So I don't think so that would apply for us. So the room is like if you go to a high-end gastropub, there's separate rooms, a wall, but no doors, so it's opened. So basically it's one single area.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to?
Yeah. So I just found a post on our local Facebook group, and someone posted Lizzie Parsons in May. So Hariola recently set up a community initiative called Mother Tribe Gang, the local community events and networking group for mothers. The club hosts 2 events, a coffee morning for mothers and a speaker and networking event coming in the autumn. Our first coffee morning is Monday, the 27th of June at Hartlepool in Walgrave. You can find all the details here. Little ones are welcome at all events. My huge thanks to Sarah and Nick at Hartlepool goes on. My point being that kids are invited for events, and whether or not they're called parties, they are present from early morning.
How's that with you?
I have no idea how to respond to that. If you go into a licensed restaurant or a licensed cafe, Little Chefs, before they closed, were licensed, and you could take a child into a Little Chef that was licensed. So if we're not serving anybody who's underage, and it is the circumstances which I've described, and They are not parties. They are, I'll use the word gatherings because perhaps it's a clearer way of looking at it. The adults who are there, if they are imbibing too much, they won't be sold anymore. They won't be supplied anymore. And the children will not be at risk. We wouldn't allow it. The operators of the store are parents. They would not allow it. We have to keep this, I'm sorry. The perspective of the application is one where it is a small operation and we are seeking to provide drinks to people who are using the site, as we've explained. The children's parties thing, parties being the word, is almost a side event. You've already heard evidence that there were only 3 to date. I think that's the figure you gave.
Not in the sense of a party that we spoke about previously. And to clarify, that group was some new mums. This lady set up a business congregating new mums who are breastfeeding, and they have babies in prams. It's not a party. It was somewhere where they could talk about support. So we often have groups that may come in, whether they're walkers, support groups for people who will say, can we book a table? And that's a little group that will come in. We are a family coffee shop. It's not, we don't host children's parties per se, and it's not something we would do.
Can I ask something just to clarify? I think on page 37, there's a floor map or floor plan. Could you take me through what the current usage is of the bike cafe? Because just to show you where I'm going with this, I think elsewhere it's fairly obvious that you've got seating and tables. And I wondered, given that we've not been there to see it, if you could just take us through what the room looks like and what its customary usage is. And do people tend to stand around with their bikes having a quick lemonade or something? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. Yeah. So you would enter the shop through the main entrance and you're faced with the coffee counter directly in front of you. There's window seating in each of the 3 main windows overlooking the high street with high stools. There's then the cafe area, a step down into a little snug area with seating. To the left is a door leading out into a private courtyard with more seating. If you come back a little bit and take a right, there is the bike, what we call the bike cafe. It's basically bike racks. So if somebody, because we're an RCC partner cafe, wrapper. So if cyclists come in, they come in that bike cafe door, they hang their bike up in that area and they proceed to the counter to buy their refreshments. In cases where there's no cyclists, their peak time is gone and that room remains empty, which it is probably 80–90% of the time. We may put a table out as an overflow for a family to sit around. And that's it.
I'm so sorry. As clarification, there's a very nifty system now where there's clips where the front wheels and sometimes the base wheels can be clipped into these funny little U-shaped things, and the bike then stands on its end. So it doesn't take up any space at all compared to my garage where there's maybe 3 or 4 bikes just leant against the wall. It's totally different to that. But what you do have is the depth of the bike along the wall.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so
I've still got questions.
Thanks, Joe. Just on the back of that, and I'm just looking at the WB's Woking Borough Council policy again. I think it's something Mr. Warlow picked up. I'm looking at 8.3 of the policy, and it says, where appropriate, applicants should state in their operating schedule whether or not. Do you want to find that, Mr. You got it. Thanks. I've got on this paragraph 8.3. Stating their operating schedule, whether or not they'll admit children to any or all parts of the premises, and where children have been admitted, I won't read this all out, are to be admitted, the steps that will be taken to protect them from harm, for example, supervision and designated areas. Is there anywhere in your operating schedule? I'm afraid I've got a slightly glitchy computer at the moment. It isn't behaving, so I can't get to it. Is there any operating schedule that addresses that? Because this is WBC policy. This is saying what WBC is expecting. Can you just address that for me, please?
No, I have not specifically said that children will be admitted to the store because it's not part of the national policy, and I work to the guidelines, section 186 guidelines. And I haven't picked up on that. I'm very sorry. I don't know whether these would override the national guidelines.
Well, the decision is to be taken in line with the guidance and the local policy. So I think both would apply. I'm not sure I see a conflict between the two. Are you saying there's a conflict between the guidance and the policy? If there is, can you just point out the bit of the guidance so I can check that, because that would be an issue, please. Well, in that case, what I would suggest is the local council, because the whole idea is this is devolved down to local councils, are entitled to put their own local turn on things, and that's what they've chosen to do here.
So are you suggesting that every convenience store would have to have that provision within their application as well?
I'm not saying that because, of course, it uses the words where appropriate. But it did say whether or not children be admitted. Now, you're saying about convenience stores, but as you said here, the circumstances are the children are admitted into the premises. So I think it is relevant for the committee to explore that. So I definitely feel it's relevant. That'd be my advice.
So a couple of points was about the. Sorry, though. Oh, thank you. So a couple of points were about the issues raised with Woking Borough Council, which apparently have been dismissed. So I did raise them myself. The council haven't actually come back to us to let us know or to feedback what they found, and I know for certain their noise one's still outstanding. When I left my house this morning, afraid the rat's nest is still there. I haven't made it up. It's there. So if they didn't find it, they're not looking in the right place. The only pest control measure out there is something that Phil and I have put in place. There's no other pest control that I've seen. So there's some validity to what we're saying. And although those officers might not have seen it, it's maybe because they weren't looking in the right place. And so that's tough to us to hear that's being dismissed. I've actually been asked to fill out a noise survey. So it's not been put to bed. It's something that's continuing. The gentleman also raised, we felt this was a benign application. And if you look up benign, it's gentle and kind and not harmful in effect. And actually, I found the noise levels particularly harmful. And so much so that the colleague, I can't see your name actually, he described parties as being a robust affair and not nice for members of the public. Some days it's like the party there every morning, particularly if the sun's out. They're very popular, and the garden area is like an echo chamber. And before they're officially supposed to be open at 10, you can't hear yourself think. It's so hot. I need to leave my window open. I don't have aircon. It's so loud, and just the noise from the industrial fan this morning. I just used my app on my phone, 54 decibels. Just from the fan coming through my bedroom floor. I go to bed at night and it's all the fans from all the equipment, all the chiller equipment. So I find it deeply harmful. It's affected my whole life. And I actually have to get up really early now to beat them sort of coming in the morning. So as much as their opening hours might be stated, they obviously come in earlier to set up and then they close down too. So there's all the sound that reverberates up. So I can go into all that later, but I just want to say it's certainly not benign. And Bill, we have raised, there are many emails, not just the one that he cited the council, there's many emails to Nick. And also our freeholders. We're in a very difficult position that they are the freeholder of our flats. We live there, but then they also run a business. So we're trying to sort of balance that relationship, but it's been made clear to us that they've spent all the money they're going to spend on sound insulation. They're not going to do any more. So all of our concerns are sort of fallen on deaf ears, and I've sort of almost given up. And it's only because this application came up, I've sort of spurred into action, because it will only get worse. Will I hear the additional chillers potentially that are chilling this new alcohol? And am I going to hear an ice machine going every time an ice cube drops? Because I can hear all the doors opening. A door, when it opens and closes, it opens 5 times. I can hear that every time in every door, wherever I am in my flat. And you can hear the cooking, you can hear the banging, the furniture moving in and out, or the plant pots from outside get pulled in every day. It's all of it. It is a very old building, and that's why those provisions were put in that planning application to protect the residents, because we objected at the time. And just to sort of blithely say, oh, we're going to change them and take them out and take that, I'm dreading that it has a profound effect on my life. If I didn't have to hear it, it would be fine, but I had to sleep in that room, and I had COVID. I couldn't be sick in my own bed. I've got an eye thing. I've had to spend more time on my couch than I have as a student, because I can't spend that time in my room without being disturbed by all the noise that comes up from below. It's deeply harmful. It's not benign, and I'm not saying this trivially. Obviously, there's lots of support that people do use it. It's really popular, but it's significantly adversely affected my life. And I just need to make that clear. And we still do have open cases with Wakeling, as far as I'm concerned.
Very much. Very adequate explanation of how you see it from your perspective. I don't know whether anyone wants to come back to anyone else. Did you want to come back on that, sir?
Just there was an issue last year, or which I referred to earlier, where there was a fan that was making noise, and that's been put on a timer that turns it off at 3 o'clock. And that was assessed as being sufficient to deal with that particular issue. No other issues have been raised with noise abatement that we're aware of.
Yeah, thank you.
1,500.
I'd just say it has run throughout the night. In the early days, there was a good 6-month period where it kept coming on and off. They did put a timer on, but that means that during the day, even when it's on, I can't use my bedroom. I don't own the leasehold, but I own the leasehold, not the freehold, and I've spent a lot of money, and I can't use the whole room in my flat.
Okay, let's move on then. I think we'll move now to individual people. Should I go from left to right? If you'd like to speak.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt, it's Phil here. With regards to these representations for support, in terms of the guidelines from the licensing objectives, how do these support letters fall in line with those objectives in terms of crime, disorder, public safety? They're just saying, yeah, we want a place in the village, we can go for a drink. How is that relevant to the licensing authority? It's irrelevant.
Mr. Warder, broadly, I agree with you. But representation isn't necessarily negative if it's positive in the sense of supporting, saying that, we have submissions that say that this business will support the licensing objective. That's relevant, but certainly saying this is a nice place to go and have a glass of prosecco, that's not relevant. I mean, it helps in terms of the business saying that it has that sort of support, but no, I agree with you broadly. It has to be, for someone to speak, it has to be linked to the licensing objective. And in any event, the panel, when making its decision, has to sift through the information and only rely on what is relevant to the licensing objective. So we really just want to hear anything that is relevant to the objectives. So, but Chair, I don't know, given Mr. Warlow's point, it might be fair to let Mr. Mitchener respond to that.
Before I do that, may I comment back on page 10, please? On the protection of children from harm? Because you caught me a little bit by referring to...
Sorry, and can you refer to the paragraph number? Because I've my
8.3.
Yeah.
8.3. And so you refer to 8.3, which says where appropriate, applicants should state in their operating schedule. However, I'd looked at the previous one, which is 8182. And 81 says this objective includes the protection of children from moral, psychological and physical harm. The applicant should initially identify any particular issues having regard to their particular type of premises and or activities which are likely to cause concern in relation to children. I found nothing that was likely in the operation that we're suggesting is going to occur that would likely to do that. Applicants would be expected to consider the risk of children being exposed to alcohol, drugs, gambling, activities of an adult and or sexual nature, and exposure to excessive noise or instance of violence and disorder. Such steps as are required to deal with these identified concerns should be included within the applicant's operating schedule. We are not applying for a pub, we're not applying for a club or anything like that. We're applying for a small, I'll call it coffee house. That is disrespectful because it's a boutique coffee house. And therefore, I had not specifically put in provision to cover things that I didn't think apply. And that is how this is worded. At 8.2, it says the provisions of the Act are that unaccompanied children under 16 should not be on premises being used exclusively or primarily for the supply of alcohol, e.g. alcohol-led premises such as pubs, bars and nightclubs. This is not. In addition, it is an offence to allow unaccompanied children under 16 on premises licensed to sell alcohol for consumption on the premises after midnight before 5. We are proposing 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. and shorter hours on Saturday and Sunday. Therefore, if you then turn the page to 8.3, where it says where appropriate, applicants should state in their operating schedule, I did not deem it to be necessary to do so because none of the criterion that I read and interpreted at 8.1 and 8.2 applied to this application as far as I was concerned. If I have made an error, I apologise. But in my head, this is not a club. It's not a pub. It is not a risk in the sense that we're talking about. We do not hold children's parties. It's not like McDonald's. And therefore, my wording of benign applies as much to this as to anything else. It is a gathering of people who are looking after their children at the same time, perhaps. But nevertheless, I didn't see that was necessary. So if I've made a mistake, I do apologise. So far as fan is concerned, that was addressed last year, and we did what was agreed with the noise prevention officer, which was to fit a fan that was then turned off at 3 p.m. 1500 hours, because that was what was deemed was necessary to do, and we've done that. Nothing else has come through to us from the noise prevention officer. Otherwise, we would have looked at it. Nothing has come through at all. So far as the point made about letters in support, if somebody is writing in against an application, they are bound to suggest what that representation is within the 4 licensing objectives. Regrettably, many of the representations that we have before us today do not meet that criterion. At the same time, it is very difficult for people who are making representations in favour of an application to prove a negative. What are they going to say? This will not cause harm, etc. No, that's not likely. What they are going to say is that they feel that the application is good for the village. It's going to create positive vibes. They are not going to say, and it won't cause, it won't create issues for protection of children from harm, etc., etc. Because if it did, that would mean that I'd orchestrated it in such a way as to prove those points. And that would be on point with regard to that. So I disagree in the sense that a representation in favour is kind of proof. You can't prove a negative, the negative being they're not objective. They're writing in support. But at the end of the day, it's what is before you. You have people who are saying they support the application. You have people who are saying they're against the application. And you are in, it's almost like I'm summarising, but I'm not, I promise you. But you will have to make a decision based on what the licensing objectives actually apply to amongst this myriad of things that you're working your way through. It's like walking on a path through a forest. I'm not helping, so I'll shut up. Thank you.
But in sort of response to your response, we have been asked to provide objections based on your objections. And for you to say that we got a bunch of people, bikers coming through from Henley, from London, oh, please sign this book. We're applying for an alcohol license. They're just riding through, sign it, and off they go. it doesn't make sense. It should be ignored.
Okay, thanks. I'll come to you in a minute. I am going to allow the supporters to speak. Paddle's well aware that we only take into account matters which relate to the licensing objectives, and Neil's made that very, very clear. I do want everyone to have a chance to speak and to counter arguments where appropriate. So I'm going to start with the lady here. If you could introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hello, my name is Megan Rosen. I live on the High Street, number 91. We moved into the house 9 years ago tomorrow. And Hearthstone opened during lockdown. It was a great addition to what was a dying High Street. They've renovated it very synthetically. Anyway, I've written lots of things. I will stick to the licensing questions. In Walgrave, there are limited choices of places to eat. There is the Bull Pub and there's the George and Dragon. Neither of those offer what Hearthstone offers. Hearthstone offers, you can have a big piece of cake if you like, but they also offer very healthy lunches. It's a different eating experience and environment. And to be able to enjoy a glass of wine when going in to have a salad would be a lovely addition to what they already offer. From my perspective, they completely adhered to COVID rules when they were in place. They have very highly trained staff. They have put the effort into training their staff. So I have no doubt that their staff will completely comply with the alcohol rules and regulations. They go above and beyond. They went out collecting rubbish during COVID because obviously people were getting coffee. Bins were overflowing. The local bins couldn't comply, couldn't contain it. So they go above and beyond. They are local people. They don't want to upset the village as a whole. They want to try and offer what local residents would like in the majority. On the High Street, we did have a bistro called the Weir Grove, which is more or less directly opposite. It's now become a Barber's. That had, you were able to go and eat, have cocktails, drink until closing time, and that's directly opposite Hearthstone. So that was a premises that had a license to serve alcohol and food, and people would leave there much later at night. They are responsible people. I also am talking on behalf of other neighbours on the High Street who couldn't unfortunately be here today, that we are fully in support. We are High Street residents, we're Walgrave residents. I think they offer a great service, and to have an alcohol license, it's not the sort of place, if you go in there, it's been beautifully done out. It's people like us that go and have a lunch or have a coffee. I cannot see it's the type of venue that would ever have wild parties or have drunk, rowdy people there. It's just not that kind of venue. So if you'd like to ask me any other questions about being a Walgrave resident, High Street resident, there are lots of points here, but I think I have taken the time to read through all of the objections and all of the letters of support. In fact, Lucian can attest to that because I couldn't click on the links to read everything, and I wanted to make myself aware of all of the information before I came. And a lot of the objections do hold completely irrelevant things and incorrect things regarding the High Street. We all have online deliveries. The High Street is full of vans constantly because people are having deliveries all the time. So I think there are issues that aren't really, a lot of issues that aren't relevant to residents and to people that use it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, come to you.
I can answer, yes. My name is Carlos Fares. I live on High Street on the number 50, so almost opposite to the Hearthstone. And what can I say? As Megan pointed, they've been open throughout the COVID. They helped the village in many, many ways. They support the village in many, many ways. They support the festivals and things like that. And they are a really nice hub. And any question? Any question?
Well, we'll do questions. We'll go through everybody and then we'll open up to questions. Is that all you finished?
I think, Congressman, did you have any questions?
Yes.
Do we have any?
Yeah.
Well, I'll do it afterwards. I'll just move around the table.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please.
Yes, my name's Jill Van Swanenberg. I've lived in the village for 60 odd years. May not look it, but there you go. I just want to really support what Megan said and everything she said. There are lots of other maybe more relevant things, but just to keep to what the licensing wants, I think she summed it up very well on our behalf. I don't really have anything else to add apart from the fact that it is a very good community space. We are very, very short of that. And I think if we can then encourage more people to come by having alcohol there, it would help, because I just feel that we need more community areas, and it's a great one for that. That's what I need to say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No questions. I'm totally irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry, what's irrelevant?
I think their 3 comments are totally irrelevant to the objection. So I have no questions.
But do you want to present your case against it? Would you like to go ahead?
What I'd like to start is that Nick and Sarah bought the freehold in 2018 of this property, and it consisted of 3 flats and a commercial property. Nick then purchased one of the flats downstairs and then subsequently converted the whole downstairs into the cafe. This is on the website, and Nick has worked as an advisor to clients in the retail industry for 25 years, and he knows how to develop retail opportunities. So Nick and Sarah are business people. They want to grow their business, and they're doing it in certain ways. Hence the Artisan Cafe, and more recently they purchased the now closed Greyhound Public House at the High Street. So they have 2 properties in the High Street themselves. Carolyn and I have worked with Nick on several projects because Nick being the freeholder, we're the leaseholder, and also Nick is a leaseholder. So we worked famously with Nick, block drains, new roof, bat box, bird box, etc., etc. So we worked together, and Nick came to see us and says, "This is what I'm doing." The alcohol license appeared, no discussion, didn't talk to us, didn't have a word with us to say this is what we're planning to do. So I was amazed. Caroline and I don't want to stop activities in the High Street. We really do want the High Street to become a vibrant place, but it needs to consider everyone in this application. If you go to the next slide, if you can see the cafe here, it's in a residential high street. Described there were a few businesses there. On the left-hand side is the oldest cottage in Wargrave. On the right-hand side, Sue, who runs her business on a small-time basis. And there's Carolyn and myself who live upstairs. We are directly living above this this cafe. It is mainly a residential high street. And if you go behind the building, this is behind the building, and you can see that it's surrounded by gardens, by people who have gardens next door to the Hudson Cafe. And as far as I can describe to you, there's been no consideration no discussion with the residents at all about this license. Next one. Again, it's just showing that the property is surrounded by noise, by food, by smells, and you know it's not designed to be in this particular area. If you go to the next, please. Again, above the cafe there, at the back of the cafe, this is where Caroline's bedroom is and flat. It's directly below, and it's, you know, it's just noise and noise and noise. Next, please. Again. You go to the next one, yeah. If you see here that the house on the left-hand side of the cafe, they put a table and chairs, and that window on the bottom side is Jonathan's kitchen, and above his bathroom. I mean, I don't understand how planning or how they can have customers sitting outside the gentleman's kitchen and bathroom. Next, please. Okay, so next. Again, Caroline's room above, which all the noise emanates into. As you can see, it's very close, and the noise is from various other places, other fans, etc. Next. And again. Next. So this is difficult to see, but this is the diagram of the building itself. And if you, when the three flats existed, we had a communal area, and that communal area, that's the one. The communal area is where we used to put our waste, and we still do. I have a waste area, so does Caroline, and the cafe then took over the flats waste area, and that's where they put all some of their rubbish. Now, about a year ago, there were rats around. I saw some of the rubbish being put into the waste disposal, and they'd left some food on the floor. I went into the shop. I said to Tom, you know, there are rats around, Tom, we need to do something here. So they were made aware of this. I don't know what the waste disposal situation is now, but it seems to me that a cafe to take a small area like this for waste disposal is not appropriate. And in terms of the communal access there's a door which goes into the communal area, and then inside on the left you have a door to the cafe and a window to the bathroom. And on quite a few occasions when they go home, they will leave that bathroom window open. Now, it's an area which causes some concern in terms of if they're going to start doing alcohol, if they start going to expand their business, people can just open that door, walk straight in, and they've got access into the cafe and into our communal area. And I see that as a risk for Caroline and myself. Next one, please. Next one, please. So our representations, I believe we've answered the public nuisance and on the children, etc. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is I took many pictures. This is so common on a daily basis. Outside the Artisan, there's a bay for 3 cars. Then there's a gap with double yellow lines. There's another bay. And constantly people are just turning up, parking their cars and going in for a quick coffee. They could be there for 5-10 minutes. And as you can see at the top left hand, what it does, it extends the traffic jam through the high street. And as the cars come to the end of the car on the double yellow, buses then or cars can't get through the high street. They then have to mount the curb on the other side. And there are children, there are people walking around, but and now with further deliveries, with further collections for alcohol, they even on their website, they state curbside collection available. I mean, there's nowhere to park apart from double yellow lines because those spots are full most of the time anyway. Next, please. The gentleman, sorry, I can't remember your name, but you mentioned that there was no timestamps on these. Well, these are, you know, it's dark, so it must be in the morning. You know, there are deliveries. We mentioned it to it. I know that we mentioned it to the shop, to the cafe. They were told about it, but they still continue. They are still. We had photographs about 2 weeks ago. So my concern is that whilst they have planning building conditions, which is the baseline for this alcohol license, if they don't have the cafe, then they wouldn't want a license. So they're not sticking to they're not complying to the building regulations, hours of use, delivery time, cooking. They're making changes on the hoof. So this is what will happen with this license. It's a property which is surrounded by residential properties, which causes a public nuisance, which causes traffic jams, and this will get worse because of what they're doing, what they're planning to do. And so my concern is that it'll just get bigger and bigger, and they'll start off until 7 o'clock. What's going to stop them opening till at 10 o'clock? They'll put in another application. They'll turn it into a wine bar. We have a public house down there on the Bull, the George and Dragon. I know it's a lovely little cafe, but it has to consider the residents. Next, please. So this was a statement made by Wargrave District Council when the application was to the asset of community value, and which was rejected by both councils. But interestingly, the statement from Wargrave Parish Council said, the village will still have 2 pubs, which is probably more than adequate given today's attitudes with more and more people socializing and drinking in their own homes. This came from a meeting of the parish council. So here we are, the council saying the Bull's good, the Jog Dragon's good, and now they're looking at giving a license to the cafe. Next, please. So this is again going back to the planning. When Nick developed this cafe, he had an acoustic company come into my flat and to Caroline's flat, and they set up all this wonderful measurement instrumentation, and stuff was going on downstairs, and they were doing all these measurements. And then based on that, he then put the roof and he put some boarding, etc. And he tells me quite often that he spent thousands on this. And then they went ahead with the cafe, but we still hear noises. It's an old building. It's practically impossible, I would imagine, to soundproof it. However, what he didn't do was come back with his instrumentation to measure what the boarding was done. So he then says, you might have to put carpets down to dampen the noise. That's not our responsibility. They are creating the noise. The noise will get worse because, as we all know, when we all consume a nice glass of wine, the levels tend to rise. So I have concern that the noise levels will increase tremendously. That's really, in conclusion, I just wanted to, Sarah sent out a WhatsApp to her friends, and interestingly enough, she said, some of our clients, some of our friends would like to have a glass of wine and a beer within the cafe. and then she made a statement, we are mindful of our residents. And I thought, what does that mean? You never came to speak to us. You never asked us, or you never discussed this with us. So I don't know what mindful of our residents are. We are upstairs, we hear the noises, and we are living in your space. You don't live in the village. You don't live in Walgrave, you live in about 4 miles in Crazy's Hill. People say you don't live in the village. And then you start saying, we only want glasses of wine and beer for friends. So why are you applying for an alcohol license for on sales, off sales, deliveries, collections? I mean, you are morphing into a business and growing it too big. A cafe was acceptable. We try and fought and we had some noise reductions, etc. It's not working, but I really am concerned that an alcohol license will give this cafe too much noise, and it will make our lives very, very challenging. I've even been told I'm a killjoy, and people are saying, why don't I sell my flat and move? The representations are fantastic, but they don't live above this shop. They live, miles away. No noise. They all think it's great. That's me.
Thank you very much. You'd like to speak?
No, only really to support. I mean, I don't live.
Could you just give your name again? So else did you spoke?
Sorry,
could you give your name again?
Jeff Knight. Yeah, my house is a mile away, so I'm personally not troubled by any noise or whatever. But I'm just really supportive of the people in the village, and I too have a concern that when things start to grow, and let's be honest, Mr. and Mrs. Hart are not in business to make a loss. They're there to grow their business and hopefully see a profit. I know they've invested a lot of money in it, and it might be a while before they do see a profit, given the expense they've gone to. But actually, when they bought the Greyhound, the Greyhound already has a license, but it's now laid empty for nearly a year. And that was a very popular little pub with the locals. Now we, just 2 pubs in the village. But part of the basis of this was that, well, we don't need any more than 2. 2 licensed premises is more than enough for a small village. And then all of a sudden, license application for another one. So it just doesn't make any sense. So whilst I must admit, personally, I'm not too adversely affected, I do support the people that are being affected. But that's really all I've got to say.
Thank you. I don't know whether you want to add to what you said.
Yeah, I'll just summarise, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, you've seen from the map, but my flat is about 800 square feet, and my bedroom's above the kitchen prep area, the bathroom's above the prep area, and it also extends into some of my kitchen, and then the servery's under my living room. But it extends all the way through to the bike cafe too. It's a very strange layout, the way they did it, and I imagine when it was all made into flats back in the 80s, it wasn't done in the best way, which we identified at the beginning, which was why sound was such an important thing that had to be dealt with. But yeah, to reiterate, I can hear fans 24/7. There are every chiller or freezer gives off a noise. I have really good hearing. Even my dad, who's deaf as a post and comes round, he can hear the Hoover if that's going at night, so he can hear that through, but everything else he can't hear. Obviously, the doors opening, closing hundreds of times a day. The cooking, all the prep noises, the banging, the alarms going off and whatnot. Also the cooking smells. If I was to walk back into my flat right now and take any of you with me, it would stink of food. It all comes up through the floorboards. So it's like, do you leave the window open because you want the air, but then you don't want the noise, or do you keep it shut? Like, you've got to make those decisions. But yeah, every time I go in, it stinks. There's also a fire risk there, because I imagine it's a heat detector in the kitchen, and the smoke's going to come into my room first before it sets off any smoke alarm. alarms. The stairs, they have a cellar, and so I can hear every single time someone goes up and down the cellar. Before they owned it, I never heard anyone go up and down. I did make clear when they took over, I could always hear the lady come in through the front door, walk through the premises, and I could also hear the phone ringing. So there was an issue before, but it has exacerbated so much more since they took over, and the measures they put in place haven't worked. You can hear the furniture moving because the bike cafe, when everyone comes in their cleats, you can hear them. So I'll be lying or sitting on my sofa, and I've got underlay, carpet, soft furnishings, curtains. I dry my laundry in there, but you can still feel it come up through the furniture. The espresso machine's under where my sofa is, so you bang out an espresso, that's 3 bangs. So I can hear that coming through. This morning I had my TV on, beef to breakfast, I was listening to music too. I actually checked it, it's on loud. I could still hear the sort of pre-prep going on. I can't lie in. I don't know if anyone else enjoys a lie-in, but I haven't been able to have a lie-in in my bed undisturbed since they opened. Like I said, I can't be sick, God forbid if I had a chronic illness. We do have these outstanding concerns of Woking, which we haven't heard back from. We've got a bottle bank about 100 metres from where the flats are. It's in the public car park, and there's signs on it saying, don't disturb the residents between these times. And literally 5 minutes before I was walking out the door, I could hear people drop the bottles in the bottle bank in the car park. If I can hear that, I'm going to hear them drop into a bin below me. It does really carry. And I think the planning conditions, as much as its officer strangely said, oh, it's fine, keep ignoring the rules. I think if you opened during COVID and you opened based on application, why does that application not stand? And obviously, as we've heard here, it has been breached for 18 months based on the prefix and the open times. Can't really understand why that wasn't addressed and allowed to happen. But yeah, also when the sound survey was done, as Phil said, it was done when they had carpet tiles in situ and they've gone. When the guy came into my flat, he was visibly shocked. It sounded like a jet engine going off, and we never saw the results of that sound survey. And they were never shared with us, and they weren't shared with Wakefield either, but signed them off because they felt that the fans were so far away, they wouldn't affect it. They just didn't take into account the industrial fan strapped to what feels like the bottom of my bed, and then all the other equipment. It is a really old building, we knew that. I don't know, we're guessing between 100 and 150 years old. Plus we're attached to a grade 2 listed property, the oldest in the village. So if I can hear it, those vibrations are obviously going elsewhere too. It's just Jonathan's death. But when his friends come around, they can hear it. Yeah, it's just disappointing. I'd almost sort of given up, but because of this application, we'll have to try it again. But it gives me great anxiety, and it's not pleasant. And I feel like I can't be in my flat. I leave work early. I was normally a night owl, and my friends just totally wowed that I'm now having to get up at 6 to try and beat stuff coming in. They come in during what officially are night hours, and I thought at least I had that as sanctity, and that's not happened either. So it's mainly the noise. I'm really worried about the noise. I get that it's a lovely community establishment, but it's personally having a huge impact in my life, and yeah, it's not fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody who's spoken. Can I come to the applicant? Would you like to raise any questions of any of the? Please go. Oh, yes.
Sorry for coming back again. The Hartdon is number 69. My house is 50, so it's not miles. So I would like to point. There was a time that we had 4 eateries on the high street. Now we just have 2. So clearly we can absorb another one. And as Megan point.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you just wait for a moment? I want you to come to the applicant.
Okay, sorry.
Then we'll come. You can ask a question afterwards. But okay, so the running order says I should go to the applicant.
May I start ladies first, if that's okay?
Yes, of course.
I'll start first with you. One question, when have you contacted the applicants direct with regard to your concerns and distress with regard to noise?
There'll be emails.
How many, please?
I wouldn't know how many, but I can get through them right now.
That would be good.
I'd say everything.
I'd like to know how many, if that's okay.
These are all the emails from Nick. Don't think we quite have time to go through every single one.
That's as far as that's concerned. If I'm sorry, I don't know the names.
Mr. Mitchell, I'll just intervene. I think it's Mr. Knight in front
Mr.
of
Knight,
me
I
and
have.
Mr. Warlow.
Mr. White Knight, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I'll just send the note. Are you the names of the it's Mr. Knight directly in front of me and Mr. Warlow.
Mr. Knight, I have no questions for. I made comment earlier with regard to my representations or response. Mr. Warlow, I know this sounds silly. Has the Artisan accepted parcels for you from Amazon in the past?
No. You did one. I can't remember. So are you saying, oh, sorry, you carry on.
No, I'm asking you, has Artisan accepted parcels from Amazon from you, for you rather, in the past?
It sounds like yes.
Thank you.
On the relevance?
The relevance is with regard to the complaint about deliveries being made to the premises, and Artisan has accepted parcels for you from deliveries made to the premises. Are you aware that next door, I believe it's Mr. Paddison, his boundary is a 6-foot high brick wall?
Clearly not.
I just thought because you'd had all the photographs, you might have known that.
So I showed a picture of his kitchen and his bathroom. There's no wall there.
Are you aware that Mr. Paddison was asked about the table in front of his kitchen window and he agreed that it could be positioned there?
He told me that he wasn't aware of that there was a table there. So have you got that in writing or is it verbal?
I do not have it in writing, sir. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Can I ask my colleagues whether they have any questions for any of the interested parties? No?
We were just wondering what the relevance was of the debate between the two members in front of us.
Sorry, for my part, I was trying to show that although Mr. Worley had suggested that, and it has been suggested that the premises is surrounded by gardens, the garden for Mr. Paddison, who is effectively on, do you have the plan at page 38? So if you look at the little red bit in the middle, that's our client's premise. And Mr. Paddison is in the building that is immediately to the north of that, or if you're looking at the front, it's to the left. And there is a 6-foot high brick wall dividing his premise from our building. And it was claimed that it was surrounded by residences. You will see that the division between those two was a 6-foot high brick wall. And I've already given in evidence that that rather large area to the right of the red circled area is actually the post office exchange, which you know about. and there's the building closer to the road, and then it's a wide area of flat grass or overrun grass as it happens. And then on the right-hand side of the yard area, so if you like, the red area is an upside down L. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, that wall there is a slatted wall which has a series of plants down in front of it, which again you've seen the photographs of. So it's not true to say that it's surrounded by residences, because there's the rear area completely is a telephone exchange. So that was the relevance of that. And as far as the deliveries are concerned, we were just trying to point out there's a level of ambiguity, isn't there, that there's a complaint against the delivery for alcohol, and yet others are utilising the same delivery versions that anybody uses along any residential road now, or in this instance along a high street, by using somebody like Amazon who make deliveries. That is a fact of our life now. Go back 10 years, didn't happen. We are told that in the future it will be with drones and such like. I don't think that's ever going to happen either. But I do see transits keep coming along, stopping off at a drop-off and delivering things. And that's what we're up against. That's what we deal with in every high street, in every street now, frankly. And that's what I was trying to highlight.
In response to your deliveries, I noted that you sent some photographs in about the cafe at the end of the street. So about deliveries of milk, deliveries outside, two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, are you saying this is acceptable? So in terms of deliveries, I've shown the pictures. You come and live in my house, my flat, and you see them all the time. And the traffic it creates, the buses that have to stop, people are tooting. You listen to some of the mails that have been sent in. It's causing chaos in the high street.
Before Harsan opened, the high street, unfortunately, drivers nowadays are very impatient. The high street isn't a particularly wide road. There were problems for the 7 years that I'd lived here previous to Harsan opening. And I'm sure Carlos, who lives across the road from Harsan, people who maybe are not familiar with the road, you have to think ahead to where you're going to pull in. There are a lot of drivers who don't think, oh, well, I can keep going, but the lights might turn green, might turn red. It isn't a problem caused by Harsan. There is a problem with traffic, which is aside to this alcohol licence, that actually residents of the high street have grave concerns about the traffic. And I and many other residents of the high street had written to Woking Borough Council trying to highlight this before Harsan even opened. There are many, many deliveries up and down the high street which have nothing to do with them. I think it's a little bit misleading to say that these deliveries are causing a danger when that isn't the case, because drivers aren't driving safely along, whether there's a delivery van parked outside Harsan, outside any residence on the high street. It's I can't quite see the relevance between granting an alcohol licence and delivery vans, because they are up and down the high street and they're tooting everywhere. I live by the traffic lights. The amount of people that jump the red lights, that is far more of a concern to residents in Walgrave than a delivery van unloading something and then moving on. I'm afraid it's a question of time at the traffic lights before there's a serious incident. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
In response to that, probably before your time, that the high street, you could park anywhere in the high street. And then they had to think about how they could manage the traffic through the high street. So what they did was they created 3 bays of 3 cars, gap, three bays, etc. So the traffic could come in and out like this. So you've got your 3 bays, which are outside the Artisan. People then come and stop and grab a coffee, sometimes 2 of them, bang, bang. So this bay is this wide now. So you can't get in because there's cars there. So I'm talking about deliveries and I'm also talking about people collecting. Now, if they're going to start allowing people to have curbside collection, which is on their website, I mean, how can you state curbside collection when there's no curb? It's double yellow lines. Surely that's incorrect information.
Thank you. Yes, you wanted to come back.
Sorry, I'm going to be brief. Opposite to the Artisan is the bus stop. So if the bus stop in front of the Artisan, it's not the Artisan fault. It's the bus stop. So of course they're going to stop and going to make some noise. It's a bus stop. I live, as I said before, I live few houses down. I have a huge bay window facing the high street. So I can see, as Megan point, the cars park on those 3 bays. People come and decide, instead of trying to fit on the space, they park beside. So there's no enough room for the cars. And most of them goes to the curb or just make a traffic jam. It's not Artisan's fault. It's the drivers that don't realize, or people just decide to push in to get faster and sooner to the lights. I live there. My bay window is just in front. I have left many times from my house to help the traffic because I see the problem and I want to jump in because I like my community. I've been really welcome there. I came from a different country and I was embraced there. So I'm concerned. If we're anything against, I would say no. And it's the opposite. Thank you. I know it was off license, but I had to say that. Sorry.
No, thank you very much. I don't know whether there's anybody else wants to raise anything. Obviously, we've covered a great deal of stuff here and a little bit of repetition, but go on then.
One more comment. They mentioned Mr. Patterson giving agreement for the table to be next to his window, but he raises it in a letter to say to listed building, reputedly the oldest in Walgrave. To put it in context, how close I am, my kitchen window opens into Artisan's courtyard. They have placed a table only a few feet from that window. They could not be any closer. I can't imagine he'd place this in a letter as an objection if he said, that's fine, you do that. It's in here.
Yeah, thank you. Did you want to respond?
If I may, sir. First of all, that is what was said. It is wholly regrettable for me that these matters are never made under oath anymore, because I always liked it having under oath, but it's not. However, Mr. Patterson did say that. Also, that kitchen window hasn't been opened for an extended period of time. There was a photo up of it earlier, and if you have a look at it, it hasn't been opened for an extended period of time. All I can say is that I have been told categorically that Mr. Patterson gave his permission for that table to be there. Notwithstanding what is said now, that is what was said at the time. Just to make that point clear, please.
Okay, thank you.
If it's relevant, do we need to come back with Mr. Patterson's another statement, counter that, or not? Just to say, I mean, if he has said that, but I don't think he has. But if Mr. Patterson needs to come back and say, no, I did not say that, is it relevant to the committee?
So you're suggesting an adjournment because we have a piece of information that might be relevant. But I
if you think it's relevant, I think it's quite relevant that there's a table next to the guy's kitchen and his bathroom, and the applicants are saying that he allowed this and he thought it's acceptable, but I don't think he said it's acceptable. Is it relevant for me to come back with a statement from Mr. Patterson to say, no, I did not accept this in writing?
Well, I'll take Neil's opinion on them.
Chair, what I'd say about that is that very, very occasionally, after a panel is finished and the panel deliberates, sometimes they might identify something they want clarification on later on, in which case what they do is they adjourn and they bring the parties back for that clarification. However, what I would say, so it's a matter for the committee when they deliberate, if they feel it's relevant, then there's steps that they might take. What I would say though, just an observation, is that what you're talking about is a table outside Mr. Patterson's window. We have to concentrate on the licensable activities. Sounds to me like that table would be there anyway as part of the non-licensable activities anyway. I appreciate your point, Mr. Waller, which is that the table is there, someone is there with an alcoholic drink, and maybe they're a bit more likely to be noisy than they would be. But the position of the table, my own view, but it's the committee's decision at the end of the day, is the relevance of that to licensing activities and objectives looks very much on the small side. But that's what the committee would do. If it spotted something that it wanted covered, it needed to be covered, it would bring the hearing back. Obviously, that's happened about twice in my career. It's a very, very rare event. We don't like doing it, but that's the way the committee would react to that likely.
Okay, so we can.
Can I just have one more point?
Just to summarise what Neil said,
sorry.
when we deliberate, we will decide whether that warrants a recall to continue. That's correct. That's what you meant, isn't it?
Yes, in effect, until the decision is made, then the hearing is still technically live. So if a committee decides in deliberation it needs more information, it's got the ability to carry on and do that. So that's what will happen. So I think for the moment, what the committee will do is we will filter through all of the information it decides, and what it does is like a filtration process. It will push aside matters that it doesn't feel are actually relevant to the licensing objectives.
Okay. Where I was sort of coming from is in Mr. Patterson's letter, he stated that when the application for the cafe went in, he objected, he didn't want it to go, he had these concerns, it's in his back garden, etc., etc. So during the conversations he had at that point, he said, okay, it's going to be a cafe, you're operating within these hours, there's going to be no alcohol, there's going to be no further developments. And he was told that. So, there's misrepresentations possibly on both sides, if that's relevant. The planning application compliances have not been agreed. So there's lots of, our concern is that this application, they'll take it as it is, and then it'll grow. Eventually, we'll be sitting on top of a wine bar. And our properties, being an investment for our pensions, for our livelihoods, will go down because we'll be sitting on a wine bar, possibly, and then Mr. and Mrs. Hart will sell that property as a going concern, and we won't be able to do anything about it.
Okay, that is fully understood. And I think, looking at me.
Chair, sorry, I've taken up far much time than I should do. It's one question to Mr. Mitchener, and it's just to, again, I'm trying to cover all bases, Mr. Mitchener, and that's all. And I'm sorry I didn't raise it earlier. It's just looking at the application, supply of alcohol to start at 0900, apart from Sundays 1000. Now, you mentioned that in the presentation that what we're talking about is glass of wine with lunch, whatever. Why the earlier hours? Why do you want to be able to serve alcohol from 9 a.m., for example?
I'm sorry, I thought I covered it with a question from one of the committee members as far as the off-licence element was concerned, and also breakfast Prosecco is very important in some circles, particularly on birthdays, we've found.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, I think we're done as far as you're concerned. So we have to ask you to retire, and we will retire in another direction. Did you? Well, I'm doing it fairly casually. If you want to speak, by all means.
I think that under the circumstances that we would all feel prejudiced if we weren't allowed just to do a quick summary.
I've always said if I'm allowing people to speak when they wish, so go ahead.
Those appearing against are entitled to make any summary first, I think, as far as the procedure is concerned.
Do you think that?
got down to paragraph 16. After hearing the application representation, the subcommittee will ask any further questions of any party that it may have. We've got to that stage. Chairman will ask all parties if there are any further relevant points that have not been covered in the hearing, and to give a brief summary, the applicant going last in order. So, Chair, my advice would be is to invite Mr. Warloo and the other objecting parties to summarise first, and then the applicant summarises last.
Okay. I don't know whether you wish to do that. If you do, Mr. Warloo, okay.
So I think in what I've sort of listened to here today is that the license application is being considered as a license application and nothing else. And that concerns me in terms of, now there's a planning application which has gone in and which has been signed off. And therefore there are conditions within this planning application. Now, the applicant have said, we have applied for a licensing application, and the further traffic developments or the further noise is not the consideration of the license. Now that concerns me because I think it should be. You know, it's planning. The license would think, what's the great picture here? What's going to happen when they get an application? What's going to happen to the inside the cafe, outside the cafe, the residents, people in the street, the traffic? That's got to be a consideration. I know it's outside of that. This is what I've been hearing, but I would say needs to be thought about. And again, clearly there's no consideration for the residents here. Absolutely nothing. This is all about business. They started off as a cafe with nice, lovely food. Now they're doing unprepared food. They'll put a planning application in to change that. It's a bike shop because they wanted to grow their business. There's competition in the area, so they have to change. They have to develop, and that's what's happening here. So what's next with this cafe is my concern. I think it'll eventually become. They'll get the license, and then it'll scope and it'll creep, and eventually it's a residential high street. It's barbers. That's not, that's okay. There's the Woodcliff Hall opposite. It has events once a quarter. It makes noise. It has people coming out, but it's not a daily event. So I'd ask you to consider it from a residential perspective and the high street itself.
Thank you very much. Would you like to speak, sir?
Yes, very briefly. As I said, I'm only here in support of the local residents. But historically, and it was demonstrated during the application speech, that inaccuracies do apply with what is going on here. And I just feel that it's presented in a way that is just good for the village, good for everybody. But it clearly isn't all that good for the people that are living right above the shop. And I do appreciate this gentleman is highly skilled at doing the job he does, or he wouldn't be doing it. Nick is a very highly skilled and successful retail expert. They know which way is up, and things tend to move on at a rate. And I would be enormously surprised if this won't be the same. This will go much further than just a glass of Prosecco over a dinner or a breakfast. So I would just ask you to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
I guess to me, it's noise. It's the current noise and what a new license might add to the existing noise, which is deeply upsetting. So if anything can be done about that, or that be solved before anything is added to hours or licensable activities, or before any more applications are considered. We have talked about planning a lot. Deliveries came up originally because that was also on the planning consent too, as were the hours, as was the type of food cooked. And no matter what the officer says now, it was on the application. It was ignored for 18 months. So I accept the last comment about there being walls around, but sound travels. And I know there's other residents in Sue next door hasn't spent as much time in our garden either. And it is deafening, and they do get really busy on really hot sunny days. And as much as the comments have come back about putting carpet in, who here has a carpet in their bathroom or who has a carpet in their kitchen? People don't do that. And even when I do have carpeted areas, the sound still reverberates. So it's the noise for me. I really need that thing too before anything else is added to any actions.
Mr. Mitchell. Thank you very much. It's been raised again, so I will just reiterate, there are no rats. That's been addressed, and the enforcement officers are perfectly happy with the circumstances of how we deal with waste now. The number of deliveries that we actually have are very limited. At the moment, it's between 6 and 8 a week, so it's not a huge number in any event. But then everybody along, if other stores open along that high street, they will be facing the same dilemma of getting stock. It's the only way you can do it. Equally, residents will be getting progressively more and more deliveries via Amazon, Deliveroo, whoever it is that you want to think about. Curbside collection is a retail term. What that means is you drive up and get it. It doesn't mean you literally park outside the store. You might park up around a corner or wherever you can actually park. It is a retail term. It's a euphemism for you're coming to collect it and it's going to be ready for you. It's not a bistro or anything else. We're applying for the hours we're applying for. And it's disingenuous, I think, to suggest that it's going to be changed as soon as it can possibly be changed. And also, there has been a lot of thought put into this with regard to supporting local residents, which is why, for example, we've only applied, I've been knocked down out of the sky, I know, from 9 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock. I've licensed stores for 24 hours. I've licensed stores that have planning for hours, and we've gone right from the start of the planning to the end of the planning. On this one, we chose that 9 o'clock, even though we could do off sales before that, we went for 9 o'clock because that was a fair and reasonable way of dealing with it. And we adjusted to meet the planning as well on that. But the Act is clear that we must be guided by the police and your officers. All of us must be guided by the police and your officers. But the decision per the guidelines should be that we're guided by your officers is evidence-based. That I don't agree with, because I was going to quote Thwaites, and Thwaites is misquoted that says you have to have evidence. You don't, but it has to be clear as to what is happening. And where 9.12 is very relevant, but where Thwaites is more relevant is it suggests we must be guided by what is before us and to deal with the matter based not on what we know or we feel or even what we want to do, based sometimes on emotional representation, but rather with exactly what is before us today, an application for the sale of alcohol for very specific hours in line with your policy, with no relevant evidence against the application, as there is none for the hours sought. Nothing relevant to the licensing objectives has been raised, albeit there has been an awful lot of representation made. If we cut through it and only take account of what is relevant to the response to the licensing objectives, there is nothing there that is tangible or sufficient, in my view, to refuse this application. We would ask, therefore, that the application for this new license be granted exactly as applied for, together with the agreed conditions already, and reiterate that when considering the application and assessing the reps against it, the facts are taken full account of. The reality of the responses from the responsible authorities are definitively at odds with the claims of those making representation against our application. Should any difficulties actually arise, it should be by way of review that they are dealt with in the future, rather than the licence being limited now on the basis of what may happen in the future or irrelevant concerns. And that includes suggestions that this small 9 while 7 with changes over the weekend suddenly becomes a bistro or a pub or something else that's open even till 11. But we should also take account of the number of units that were licensed until 11 that no longer are open. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I think we finished there. Thank you very much to everybody. If you'd like to leave us, then we will consider our judgment. And the applicant is informed within 5 working days. Will be informed, as you sure you know already. Okay,
That's
thank you
perfect.
very
Thank
much.
you ever so
Thank
much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for the fire. I assume it wasn't a fire, but hope not.